Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Andrew Kurtz on, and you can relate to the fitness scheme of things as he started like a little bud, and over time he continued to show up and put in the boring work, and the boring work, seemingly nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden he's got this massive social media presence, this massive networking. The more you get into it, the greater the progress. If you think of this in terms of like showing up to the gym, it's like at first you have to learn all these little skills. You have to learn how to squat, how to deadlift, how to execute movements. And then once you've got the basic skill, you progress at such a faster rate, kind of like an S curve, but then it kind of like plateaus. But you would not get to that place that you want to be if you can't get yourself kind of accustomed to things seemingly not changing all that much. If you keep kind of putting your expectations on going to how fast progress was at first and expecting to keep progressing at that rate, the side effects of that is you're going to keep sabotaging, because when progress isn't happening fast enough, what are you going to do? When things seem too slow, what are you going to do? What do you feel leads to this overabundance of people still recycling the same crap and wondering why nothing's changing and struggling? And like, people just want this end result. But I feel like more and more people are struggling now, even though there's more and more information out there.
There's a lot here, so I'll try to tell the story and use it as a metaphor, because that's what you open up. So, okay, I've been a trainer for 14 years. I have been working out in gyms for much longer than that. In fact, my dad bought me a weight set when I was a teenager. I was involved in sports, athletics, what have you. I was very lucky. My parents were very supportive of that. A lot of nourishing home-cooked meals. I had that advantage growing up. Amazing, right? They're way ahead of their time. But I wasn't necessarily super consistent with the weightlifting in junior high, high school. Even getting into university, I remember me and an old university girlfriend, we would go to the gym a little bit, but we'd be sporadic, didn't stick with it. Something changed in my life at 24, and I got serious. I just shared in my Instagram story within the last 24 hours a post from my old friend Frank McGrath, and he's a very famous, very iconic IFBB pro bodybuilder. He's been on the Olympia stage against people like Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler, and he was one of the people that was in the gym same time as me. He'd be in the next rack. He's an old, like I said, old friend of mine. We'd hang out outside of it, as he liked to point out, partying and whatnot. It took 24 years of age, 23 years ago, almost, to get consistent. And then I noticed things started to change. Along the way, both through my own fitness and in my fitness career, it was, as you said, it was a lot of head down. I never fixated on the results, the immediacy of results, either in fitness career. So let's go to the career side. I started 14 years ago as a trainer. I was hired off the gym floor. I put my head down in the work. I got busy. I was lucky. I generated referrals. I generated renewals. As other trainers left, their clients wanted to come train with me. For 6 years, I focused on the client in front of me. I kept my schedule very busy. I was earning a livelihood. Along the way, I was gaining experience. I dove into fitness podcasts, not unlike this one, right? There weren't as many around back then. I started reading T Nation, online articles, started finding the influential strength coaches of the era, and still today, who were writing articles for their own websites. I would dive into that, bodybuilding.com, etc., all these sort of resources. Follow these people on their social media. And meanwhile, I am a full-time personal trainer. I'm active on Facebook. I'm sharing my client results, etc. But I have otherwise no internationally recognized brand. I start year 7. I leave the old gym company, start out on my own business, a little bit scary, but went really well. Around the same time, I planned to start traveling to fitness conferences where I met people like Jonathan Goodman or a variety of the well-known fitness industry figures. And I also happened to start a podcast with a friend who wanted me to do one with him. And we started having industry figure guests. Mike Isertel, Sohee Lee were 2 of our first 10 guests. Those blew things up. The podcast did very well. And he made me continue on with that podcast. That podcast exists today. I rebranded it, reframed it into the general population. Over 300 episodes of consistently showing up. I started writing for my website with the intent of writing blogs. Through the podcast and travels, I got connected to some of the figures in the fitness industry who wrote for T Nation, including an editor. And that editor turned around after being a guest on our podcast, said, "Hey, would you consider coming to write for us?" Because she saw I'd been doing some writing. like, with no grand ambitions. So I said, yeah, Any Right 15 Nation was a major kicking off point. That led to a lot of other writing things. Over time, I'm still just writing the article one at a time, putting it up. Then that turned into me saying, all right, I need to be more active on Instagram. Around 2019, I said, okay, let's just show up daily, be consistent, no expectation of a specific return. I remember after 5 months, I was at 3,000, I went to 3,900. I gained 900 followers in 5 months. Thought that was pretty cool. Okay, I've had days like that since. And then I remember Jordan Syatt, who I'd been connected through podcast, shared one of my posts in his story, 400 followers overnight. Then Mike Gisertel kept sharing my stuff on his wall, tagging me. By the end of the year, I gained 10,000 followers. Wow, that was my 2-year goal. I gained it in 1 year. Holy shit. Okay. Based on all of the consistency and the cumulative effort of doing all these things to just show up, just like for years, I've showed up one workout at a time, enjoying the experience, that workout feeling a little bit stronger, but not worried about where I would be. It added up to, it's a compound effect. There's a great book on this, The Compound Effect. I can't remember the author's name, Darren Hardy maybe, and another book called The Slight Edge.
Yeah, Jeff Elson, that is such a good book.
So both of those books talk about the same principles, and it's really just this curve that you reference. It is very incremental. You don't notice a compounding effect initially, but stretched out over a long period of time, you start to see, metaphorically or literally exponential returns on the accumulation of years of work. And that's the same thing for anybody who, and I don't like channeling fat loss this way. It is sort of true with fat loss, but I like focusing on getting stronger, getting more skilled, day by day by day. But what you notice is the compounding effect of that strength and that skill over time consistently. And you notice that if your goal is in fact a fat loss goal, you've lost more weight, your metabolic rate is higher, you are stronger, you have better energy, you are capable of greater output and stamina for more workouts. And all of that stuff adds up to, well, it burns more calories while you're at rest, while you're working out. And it means a changed physique. So the career metaphor, and almost anybody who's in a similar boat or further along the journey than me, their fitness stuff is the same. And someone may arrive upon social media and see a large number on Instagram and think, oh, well, maybe it was overnight, or even the people who saw the more rapid rise in the recent years and the public speaking engagements, they sometimes forget that, no, that's now 14 years of runway. And then the last 2 to 3 years certainly have seen outsized returns, compared to, say, the first 6 to 9 years.
I'm going to be very interested in your response to what I'm about to say as well, especially as I get to the end of it, because you just sparked quite a few very many things. And the first thing is, when you relate it to the career goals, you just found something that made you feel good. And This is where a lot of people go wrong. They focus more so on how something looks, or how they're going to look to others, or how they want to look, without realizing that when you feel good, you do good. And when you do good, you feel good. And it becomes this self-prophesizing cycle that actually works for you. But the thing that holds a lot of people back is usually sabotage, or impatience, or unrealistic expectations, or seeing what others are doing in front of them without realizing that the further. I remember when I was an elite powerlifter, I followed elite people who were also heavier than me. Like, I was in a 56s class in kilos, and I was following like people that were in the 70s and the 75s lifting even heavier weights. And here I am comparing all of my shit to their shit. And I remember my coach back then was just like, you do realize that you're following the best of the best because that is what's filling your social media feed, but you're missing out on where the majority are. And that's what we tend to do. But back to what I was saying, the first goal is to get yourself into the process. And that's easier when you focus on what makes you feel good. And instead of trying to add more and more and achieve more and more, get consistent at what you're doing first. And then you can improve, and then you can optimize. And as you're going through this process, everything shifts around you. And it's when everything shifts that it sticks. And the compound effect, where you are now, which is part of what I commented on one of your posts, that's where you are now. You're focusing on your past by focusing and berating where you are now. If you're beating yourself up for where you're not, et cetera, where you got to, because that is an accumulated effect of your past habits, past beliefs. They all stack. They can stack for you or against you. And you can change that one action at a time. But if you try to manage all of these different things, it gets very hard to juggle. And this also feeds into the cognitive bias of the more that you stack your beliefs and habits in a certain direction, the more that you're going to kind of force yourself into that echo chamber. And then it becomes really hard to pull yourself out, to move yourself forward in any way, which is kind of where coaching comes in and why coaching is so valuable. But where I wanted to see where you kind of take this is that whole self-prophesizing cycle that I mentioned before about when you feel good, you do good. When you do good, you feel good, but self-sabotage sets us back. Is my whole message is when you focus on getting stronger, everything changes. When you focus on building muscle, everything changes. But so many women are like, I don't care about getting strong. I don't care about building muscle. I just want to look better than I do now. I hate how I look. But it's like, that is still the way, because physical changes and the scale, and like I messaged you, which you told me, Rachel Henley, which I'll get to eventually and ask her on. But it's like focusing on all of that physical movement, it's only going to get you somewhere temporarily, but it's never going to keep you there, because that is great until when? You can't keep losing weight forever. You can't keep focusing on dieting forever, but it's almost like people only have a dieting identity. They don't know anything else. But when you focus on things that enhance your life, that grow your life, that excite you, that empower you, that actually feel good, because when you're fueling yourself, you're energized. When you're chasing like everything that just grows you, empowers you, it's exciting to get stronger. It's exciting to realize that you just deadlifted twice your body weight. In the process, we're working on the habits that are keeping you stuck, like emotional eating, like the things that lead to the sabotage with your body image, with your food. That's all working in the background, while there's this thing that's keeping you going from sabotaging, from triggering yourself back to restricting calories. I'm very keen for your take on that and how we can get people to care about this instead of, but I just want to look better. I don't care about muscle and strength and fueling. I just.
For everybody listening, you got a really good, window into how Ruby's brain works, right? That was just like, a shotgun of a lot of stuff, right? Okay, let me see if I can sort of draw this in. I don't think we can force people to think anything, right? The people who have grown up around, I like this framework. If by chance you're someone listening who still struggles with this, and you have beliefs and focus around your body image, and particularly your value to society, in your how your body looks, your leanness, this sort of stuff. Ask yourself, where do those ideas come from? Where do those beliefs come from? Now, is that something that you objectively and inherently believe to be true? Right? Ask yourself, is that objectively true? Really? Right? This is an old Byron Katie sort of thing. You ask yourself the question, is something that you believe objectively true? Is it really, really true? Right? And then you can go into like, how would your life be different if it wasn't true? But let's take it further. Let me reorient my thoughts. I like thinking in terms of a concept of beliefs as artifacts, right? A separate entity. Is it really your own? Does it belong to you? Or is it an artifact of mom's beliefs? And mom can be metaphorical or literal, right? And this is not to say mom bad, because keep in mind too, give mom grace, because mom grew up in a culture where body image, certainly of many of our moms' eras, whether it's television, Hollywood, fashion magazines, runway models. I was on another podcast today. I was talking about Oprah Winfrey and Oprah's history of dieting. And there's a quote from somewhere that Oprah is both the greatest perpetuator of diet culture and herself a victim of it. And that's a powerful statement to kind of realize you have this powerful and influential figure who, through probably no nefarious intent, for years documenting her own weight loss struggles and the different diets she was going through. And you kind of realize, well, what environment she in? She's a powerful and successful woman. who happens to be in the public eye nonstop, tabloids, Hollywood, celebrity, and probably facing a nonstop stream of expectation and more than a little bit of ridicule because she struggled with her weight. So if you're someone who grew up with that as either watching it every day or your mom watched it every day, or at least it's within your view, it's no surprise that a lot of people, women probably more than men on this, but men can be too, are vulnerable to the beliefs that, hey, somehow my value in society or my attractiveness is in my leanness or how I look. So what do? We say, let's put a pin in that and go, all right, is that objectively true? Or is that an artifact of culture, marketing, maybe mom, metaphorically or literally mom's belief systems? And if we recognize that, we can start to say, well, maybe that's not mine. Maybe that's not a part of me. I don't need to own it, and I don't need to hold on to it, especially if it's maladaptive and causing us grief and pain. And that starts the process of maybe letting it go. As far as getting people into the experience of enjoying strength and performance, again, I think it's a lead the horse to water. You can't force people to drink, but if you're someone who's listening to an episode like this, you're probably already bought into it. And we can only model these behaviors, whether it's we're doing it in front of friends and family. As coaches, we try to create an incredible experience for people who tiptoe in, and fundamentally they want to lose weight. But in order to get someone to lose weight, most good coaches will still try to come from a foundation of let's get people strong, let's get people to enjoy the process, the experience of being with us. So I focus on those things. And maybe it's bait and switch, and I'm comfortable with doing that, right? I don't ever look at someone and say, you shouldn't care about fat loss. In fact, there's a corner of our industry that gets just insane about this sort of shit. And what you're doing is you're invalidating what someone's wishes are. We don't necessarily need to say, yes, that is a great goal. You should lose weight. You don't have to do any of that kind of crap. But you can say, okay, I hear you. I understand this is important to you. I understand why this is important to you. I'm going to help. I'm here to help. Okay. And then you show them how we're going to focus on keeping you moving. You're going to burn calories, sure, even though as time goes on, it's not going to be our focus. I want someone to feel like we're doing something that helps them. It's one of my big pet peeves. And we see even smart people now saying that exercise isn't good for weight loss. I'm like, yeah, you guys are like technically and pedantically telling the truth. I was like, but why? Why do we need to perpetuate this? When in fact, if we get people exercising, resistance training, even cardio, we get them doing something that's good for their physical health, their mental health, they're building bone mineral density, building muscle. And over the long run, it does improve. Trainers like to minimize. Yes, technically speaking, a little bit more muscle mass does not make that big a difference with our metabolic rate. But then those same fucking people are turning around and saying, well, if you diet without exercise and you lose muscle mass, then it loses your metabolic rate. Like, which fucking way is it? And the reality is even though these effects may be small, they do magnify over time, compound effect. So I don't like the messaging when trainers get into those pedantic weeds and say, oh, well, don't worry, it doesn't burn a lot of calories. Guess what? If someone wants to think that they're burning calories and you get them strength training, which is going to do all these other wonderful things, let them fucking understand that there are some calories being burned. Maybe you don't have them doing jumping jacks between their heavy lifts to keep their heart rate elevated. Okay. We can bait and switch them, make them progressively lift heavier things, feel strong and accomplished, and measurably improving performance week over week. Talk about it, get them excited, have them trust the experience in you, look forward to coming back. And maybe you're not talking about energy system stuff. Maybe you're talking to them about their favorite celebrities, football, right? Or Aussie rules football, right? Or, whether it's what I don't watch any TV anymore. Like Game of Thrones is done, but for a while there was Game of Thrones. There's 8 seasons of it. Or then there was Shogun and Breaking Bad or whatever the fuck is on television. And if they like it, bridge the gap. Make them relate to them. And then they keep coming back. They like you. And after a little while, they realize, wait a second. I don't care so much about fat loss. Still a goal. I like feeling strong. I notice I have better energy. I notice my mood is better. I look in the mirror and I see changes and I'm feeling good about it. And along the way, that consistency and the compound effect of it also happens to see, wait a minute, I'm getting leaner as well. Is how many times have we had a client who's like, scale hasn't changed, clothes are fitting different, measurements have changed, I'm feeling good, but we're also laying the foundation that with trust we can turn around and say, okay, your goal is still fat loss. Now, can we try a planned temporary period of deliberate calorie deficit, right? So that way it's not extreme restriction. Go evidence-based and say, we're going to do this for 8, maybe to 12 weeks. Okay. Here's the plan. We're not permanently dieting. We are going to go through a calorie deficit phase, call it a diet, whatever. And then we're going to bring you back to maintenance calories and you're going to get a break from it. Okay. So it helps train that person to realize it doesn't have to be a perpetual diet of restriction, because what do? They try to do that. They think it's permanent. They don't have the skills. They get frustrated. And then after a while, they're noticing that they're cheating on the diet. They're not being consistent. They get frustrated. They're miserable. In their mind, they're restricted. And then they go, fuck it. Hey, this isn't worth it. And then they go completely off the deep end into a big surplus, and then they regain weight. And then they do cycles of that. Let's get them to trust the fact that, hey, you can do this. It's not permanent. And then the intention at the end of the day is if we can get someone down to, a goal physique, a goal weight, a goal whatever, right? And oftentimes there's a common saying, the body of your dreams weighs more than you think, right? Whatever that ends up being, if we can get to that end state, well, the goal is going to be long-term maintenance, not long-term deficit anyway. And with that messaging and trust, people start to buy into it, and they'll probably feel a little safer to do tougher phases, which gets the body fat off, which is their goal, and that's valid. And then all along the way, we've been focusing on building strength, building muscle. They've noticed their body has changed. And my guess is the evolution of most people is that their values and goals will shift as they see evidence that this is really fucking amazing. So I'm not a big believer in sitting down and going, hey, your goals are wrong. This is invalid. Don't do this, because that they're just going to go and they're going to go to someone else who will market and tell them the bullshit they want to hear, and sometimes maybe lie or mislead them. And then they're going to have a terrible experience and waste their money and get frustrated and mistrust our industry, and they're going to struggle. So sometimes it's not dishonest, but sometimes we actually have to tell people what they want to hear, listen, empathize with them, never lie, and never invalidate their goals, all while showing them how awesome it feels to be active, to be strong, and not do things that make them feel sick and not want to come back. There's a lot there, but
I love that.
That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know how to do this stuff.
That's literally just, I love it, because you're reinforcing everything that I said in a way that's like, we are not dismissing your fat loss goals. Like, just the fact that we want to focus on strength, we want to focus on muscle is not dismissing your vanity goals. And it's very easy to think that we are dismissing it when there's so many people that are anti-diet in the industry now that are completely giving it a bad name. There is nothing wrong with that. It's rewriting narratives and giving yourself a reason to trust yourself. And it's hard to trust yourself when your resume of dieting has you gaining weight back every single time, when your resume of dieting has you forcing it every single time. And I try to use this example of when I was trying to get out of my rut. And the reason I would not trust myself to let go of where I was because the only thing I knew was struggle. And I didn't want to struggle again. I didn't want to have to do it over again. I didn't want to have to let myself go, end up worse, and then go through that same grind to get back to where I was. Because as if I was going to be able to do that again when I was already feeling like I was at the bottom of a hole. So giving yourself evidence that you can do incredible things is what feeling strong and accomplished is all about in the gym. And the focusing on burning calories, I feel like it's actually understated. Like, they quote muscle, well, fitness professionals quote muscle at rest. It doesn't burn as much as we think. Well, your muscle isn't at rest. If you're someone who prioritizes muscle and strength, and you are someone who's building a shit ton of strength, to maintain that and the lifestyle that you live, you are burning so many more calories with so much less effort in less time in that given training session. Like, how much I would burn now compared to when I started with the amount of weight that I lift now, doing like 3 intense sets versus whatever I was doing before. I'm burning so much more now with less, which makes living leaner easier. So it's not that training doesn't burn calories, because it does. It's just, that's not the focus. The focus is on getting stronger, but knowing that that does burn calories in the long run. The thing I loved with what you said is that it's a deliberate phase that we can then go into with fat loss. And that's the difference. Just because you're not focusing on fat loss outside of that, when you're starting and trying to shift your cognitive gears to what can I focus on that makes this more enjoyable, you can still be losing fat in the background and body recomposing, but it hasn't been a forced focus where you're struggling, where you're white knuckling, focusing on every single calorie you need to eat or not eat, which makes it feel effortless and it reduces the diet fatigue. Meaning when you do go into a deliberate fat loss phase, it's going to become easier because you're not going to sabotage yourself. And you can see that it actually can be a lot more, I want to say easier, but it's never really going to be easy, but it will be easier if you do it that way, because you gave yourself a break and now you're not going to be craving this, craving that, wanting to overeat, wanting to emotional eat, because your mind hasn't been living in restriction for the past however long it was there before. But I know you're very big on this too, and that's the way you speak about things, mindset, your identity. And like our last podcast when we spoke about boundaries and priorities, that all factors into this as well, and making the two kind of things work together. And okay, so how can we not sabotage ourselves this time? Because you mentioned deliberate fat loss phase, trusting ourselves to come out of it, because it's not a permanent state of being. We know that this isn't going to be a struggle forever. We're not going to have to keep white knuckling for the rest of our life. So I don't need to sabotage, because I know that this is just for a particular period of time.
Let's grab onto something here. Identity is a big one, right? So, and the word proof came in there somewhere. So ask yourself, what are you trying to prove? Are you trying to generate evidence that you can change? Or are you trying to generate evidence that you can't change? A lot of people don't think about this. And I will give you an example that this is more of a suspicion that I have, but I think it holds true, at least for some people. So if this sounds like something that you're going through, then maybe we're onto something. So think about New Year's. We're into January here. And I believe there is a subsection of the population, for a variety of reasons, that wants to consciously or probably subconsciously stay. Everything is about protecting our ego and our identity, everything we do, okay? And I think there are a lot of people who are struggling with their body image. They're struggling with their metabolic health. They're struggling with their mental health. They're struggling with the effort to achieve whatever physical body and outcome that they think they want. But there are a lot of narratives in our society, and there are some people in our industry, and I think they're ideological grifters, and I'm merciless with these people, who will share disempowering messages under the guise of compassion and empathy, misguided, misplaced empathy, to say to people, oh, here are all these reasons why you can't. Here are these statistics. It's okay. And a lot of soft landings, because they expect people to fail. And what they do is some people gravitate to that kind of messaging. And I think that this is why I call these people ideological grifters, because I think what they're doing is they're trying to build status within their ideological tribe, as opposed to actually genuinely help people. They just want people to worship them without any change. And what happens, I'm meandering a bit, is some people would rather believe it's beyond their control, because it alleviates the emotional discomfort of knowing that you can control your outcome, but somehow you're not doing something. So New Year's, you get someone who might do the New Year's resolution thing. And I don't think all people who try are like this. They will go in, they'll join a gym, they will try to keep up a pace, work out every day. They probably don't start with a skill set. They probably don't really know what they're doing. They'll fumble around with machines, they'll mess around with cardio, they'll be inconsistent. And then they'll also say something like, well, I'm never going to have sugar again. I'm going to diet forever. I will be a completely different person. No more alcohol ever. I'll just take on a whole bunch of stuff. It's overwhelming. And maybe they are able to white knuckle and willpower their way through 3 to 6 weeks of this. It's not very pleasant. It's extreme. They're probably inconsistent, but it feels awful. And then they could turn around and they can't sustain it. And then they can say, emotionally soothe themselves by saying, I tried, and I am not the kind of person, fixed language. I am not the kind of person who can do this. I am not a fit, active person. And you have just tried and generated proof that you can't do it. So that's what I mean by, are you trying to prove that you can, or are you trying to prove that you can't? And I think subconsciously, at least, I think people are setting themselves up to fail. And so it temporarily alleviates the emotional discomfort of feeling like you were responsible for this outcome. And then you settle back into life the way it was. But over the months, the emotional discomfort grows. You have various different stimuli, other people in your world are active. It creeps up, creeps up, creeps up until it hits a boiling point. Maybe you don't feel good metabolically, your mental health's not feeling good, whatever. And then you try it again. And the cycle repeats. And I think that manifests for some people over the New Year's, resolution type days. And I think at its heart, we have to decide, no, I want to generate proof that I can change. And that's why with my media, I try to focus on, yes, certainly the playing field is not fair. And there are a lot of things that make this very challenging. Physiologically, psychologically, sociodemographically, there are a lot of factors that leave some people at greater advantages and others at greater disadvantages. But at the end of the day, there are still things and power within everybody's ability. Those are the only things worth focusing on. That's it. What's within your control? It's the old serenity prayer that I'll butcher. Is like, quote, God grant me the what? How does it go? The something about
God
knowing
grant me
what.
the serenity to God grant me the serenity to trust what's in my control, to let go of what's not in my control, and the serenity to accept
The wisdom
difference.
to know the wisdom
That's
to know the difference. Exactly. And I think, you don't have to take it in terms of like a religious thing, but as a fundamental truth, it's a good outlook on the world. It is, the antidote and antithesis to victim mentality, which is where a lot of people want to stay and where a lot of people want to keep you, because then if they can keep you there, they have power over you. But instead, I want people to embrace whatever's within their ability. And even if the changes are gradual, you generate proof that, look, I am the kind of person who could change. And what I tend to look at with the people I interact with, especially clients, people in my life, is I look for fixed language versus growth language. Okay. Change talk versus sustained talk if coaches want to look at the motivational interviewing model. And if we have people that make a lot of firm, fixed, rigid statements about who they are, their place in the world, their identity, and I don't say to people, hey, you're wrong, don't do that. It's like, you have to have the trust with people, the relationship where you can say, hey, did you notice that? And then I have this conversation. It's like, and I give examples of how I, in particular, catch myself where I used to use fixed, rigid language that says I'll never do this or I'm not this kind of person. And whether or not it's something I want to change, I'll give you the example. I live across Canada, which is a massive country, from my family, my mom, my dad, my two brothers. Okay, I moved out here 18 years ago. And I visit usually about once a year. It's a long flight. I'll go for a week. And it is weird because I feel like I'm returning to a world that doesn't exist anymore. A lot has changed in 18 years. And I left because I needed to leave the environment because it wasn't being good to me. And my parents are getting older. There's been some health stuff in the family. There's been some deaths in the family, and this stuff is existentially threatening. But I own a home and I love my life here in Edmonton. And sometimes I will casually, in conversation, when this sort of thing comes up, I'll say, I'll never move back. I'll never go back there. And then the reality is that I probably won't. There are big differences. But I use it as an example to catch myself to say, don't use that language, because who knows what kind of circumstance will change 5, 10, 15 years from now. And maybe something changes. And I want to leave myself with flexible, non-boxed in, rigid thinking to consider the possibility, if the world is very different, some time from now, if anybody's familiar with the end of the world illusion, there's a sort of a fallacy. It's related to this. I'm side questing a bit. But if you think about how much you as a person have changed in the last 10 years, how much your beliefs, attitudes, how much you've grown, how much you've learned. And most people would recognize, oh, you know what, the last 10 years has changed tremendously, right? I've grown as a person, I'm not the same person. But then you ask people, how much do you think the next 10 years you will change? Oh, they assume that they won't. They think that, well, now I am the person who I am and I will always be. And I don't think much is going to change in 10 years, but the previous 10 years, you change a lot. So that's called the end of the world illusion. Right? So it's a good way to look at the lens. And the reality is we can't predict. If you go back 10 years, we certainly could not have predicted a global pandemic that would have massively shifted the way our lives work. We couldn't have predicted the rise of, now we're getting a lot of AI type stuff.
Yeah.
Trust me, AI is going to change the shit out of the world in the next 10 years, better or worse, right? So we cannot predict where we're going to be, what our belief systems are, our lives in that time frame. So what do? I try to keep an open mind about what I might do within that, what's within my control. I try to set myself up with the most metabolic health, the best emotional health, the best world around me, work hard for, flexible resources so that way in the worst case scenario, and I needed to change my circumstance, I could, right? And it's just being proactive. And I think that's the same thing with our health. I am no longer the indestructible, young man that I once was. I'll be 47 soon. And I realized, I fell on stairs. Socks, carpet stairs, and moving too fast is just a bad combo, guys. Like, seriously. And so I fell and I actually hurt my knee pretty good. And that took some months to recover. And it's not 1000%, but it's mostly better. That one, I didn't bounce back as quick as I used to. I'm like, oh shit, okay, got to be careful with this stuff. So I realized that the way that I'm taking care of myself now is going to have a profound effect on me when I'm in my 50s, in my 60s, and certainly in my 70s. That's a powerful motivator. I didn't think about this stuff when I was in my late 20s and early 30s. I was young and invincible. It was never going to come. Now all of a sudden it's like, I'm 13 years away from being a 60-year-old person. When the fuck did that happen? So priorities have shifted a little bit, but I still, there's also great convergence because I could still train for my general aesthetic goals. I'm still very big and muscular, and but I'm mindful that like maybe even being this big may not feel great at 60, and who knows, maybe even could lessen a few years off the tail end of my life. Trade-offs you got to figure out. I recently talked with my friend Luke Hosmer. We were on a podcast and talked about maintaining athleticism for life. Things like power, speed, explosiveness. These are qualities that often older people and even trainers are fearful to do with their older clients because like, oh, they might injure them. No, these are qualities that drop off faster. We actually should try to maintain these things. There's been a quote floating around for a while, or a statistic, and I can't remember the exact number, but a significant percentage of the population after the age of, I think, 30 doesn't sprint ever again in their life. Holy shit. We take that for granted as kids. So am I saying everybody out now who's deconditioned should all of a sudden start sprinting a whole lot at max effort? No, not at all, right? It's load management of good training principles and ease into things, of course. I hope it at least gets people to think, maybe I should prioritize these things. And I know that I've been I'm kind of like pulling Ruby here and just like stream of consciousness. Oh, Ruby, if you got any more questions, I'll throw it back to you and let you ask.
Any more. Tell me that's sarcastic there. Wait, no, rhetoric. But priorities shifted. I love the way that you just framed that. I'm going to work backwards with the notes that I took. But priorities shifted, I feel, is something that a lot of women, well, a lot of everyone doesn't allow themselves to just like pause and realize that your goals can evolve and your values evolve with you, but you've been so hyper fixated on this one thing that you wanted for years and years and years that you never got, that you kept forcing and forcing, that when you're starting to try again and again, you don't realize that your values have shifted, that your priorities have shifted, and your goals need to shift with you. Otherwise, there's going to be so much cognitive dissonance and incongruence that it's just going to feel like you're trying to force a circle peg into a square hole. I said that backwards. But years from now, like you mentioned, with so many things can change in like 5 years, in 3 years. Ben Hardy actually mentions this in one of his books, where you could be a totally different person in 5 years. But most people underestimate this because they underestimate how much they can change in 3 to even 1 year, because we're trying to accomplish so much in 1 month, in 12 weeks, in 6 months. And then you mentioned what's in your circle of control. And I feel like knowing what's within your circle of control and even within your circle of influence is important, but also knowing that shifts depending on where you are in different seasons and places of your life.
Mhm.
Now, with the standards that we put on ourselves, which also can make us feel like we need to control everything, but the high standards that we put on ourselves, it's great, but everything that we do, everything that we value, the beliefs with even the body image stuff, everything, it served us at a point, but once again, we don't pause to ask ourselves if it's still serving us now, if it's still leading to a beneficial outcome, or is that the actual cause of our struggles at the moment? Is that the very reason why we keep sabotaging in the same loop? You need to allow yourself to pause. And like you mentioned with the questioning, like ask yourselves the questions. I like to think of each of these situations like you're in a courtroom. You need to do the cross-examination. You need to try to get everything out of both sides of the cases, because when back to the cognitive dissonance and the cognitive biases, we don't realize that there's another perspective on something. We think that what we believe is inherently true. And when we believe it to be inherently true, we question everything except that very one thing, when that also needs challenging. And I kind of thought of this when I was squatting the other day, because from the back, my squats look absolute shit. From the side, I was hitting depth. I'm like, this is like Einstein's law of relativity, where you can have two different views and it looks like a completely different squat. I wanted to put that into a post, but I had no idea how. But I'm like, a squat can look amazing from one side, but shit from the other. The view that you have, just look at it from like this angle and this angle, and maybe change your glasses around, and you have a completely different reality. So there's that. And then there's one more, and that's the soft messaging that you mentioned. I fell into this trap where I was just like, yeah, it doesn't have to be that hard. I can like cruise now. And then I realized that I wasn't feeling like, I lost my excitement, and I struggled a lot with getting that bite back in the gym. And I only just started getting it back. So I'm like, what the hell, Ruby? Like, it's not supposed to be easy just because I've been doing this for 10 years. Like, still expecting myself to squat with all of these plates on my back. Why am I expecting this to be easy? I'm challenging a different level of hard. Like, if I was still playing at the level that I started at, yeah, okay, cool. But with every level comes a new devil. I didn't mean to say that, but I just said it. But like, with every level, there comes a new devil. And as humans, we always have that like push for improvement, but we can't just keep living in the gap. You need to realize how far you've come and how much this is benefiting you. And it's not a means of punishment. It's a means of, this is bringing so much benefit to my life in so many other ways, because I can't imagine not showing up, because I feel like crap if I don't show up. It's mental health. It's just feeling like you're attending to what is important to you, your values. So then everything else in your life, strength, muscle, circling back around to the beginning, it's so much more than just aesthetics.
Okay, so give me a question in all that. Something to grab onto.
I think the most important part is where people are now, the messaging that they're talking about now, they forget where they started. They forget what happened in the process. So trying to speak to people in those levels from this high up place makes it really difficult for there to be like a handshake there. Because, yeah, okay, you're speaking all of this. This is what it should look like now. It should, like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, people are speaking from their level of now experience. But maybe starting out, there is a little bit more of a shove you need to have. There is that level of hard. There is that level of hard talk that you need to have with yourself, but then it eventually starts to get a little bit easier. But the question that I want to throw at you is, the courtroom examining, yes, but bringing in, I'm not the person who, I am the person who, because that starts to make you meld yourself to an identity, realizing that this person that you're looking up to, that can be you too. If you start where you are, circling around back to the beginning with your fitness career, just showing up, putting in the work, and then that expands, that opens up, and it's a new devil at a different level. But you're not even thinking about the devil now because you're in the process. You are that person. You can't imagine the alternative reality. Because I'm sure you can't imagine doing anything different than what you're doing now.
Oh, all right. I'll try to grab onto a couple of things that I think are within there. So I'm almost out of time, so I'll finish up here. Identity is at the root of all this stuff. Okay. And like I said, our behaviors are either reinforcing a fixed and rigid identity and keeping us in place. And you said this something about, our behaviors serve us, but are they still serving us? Are they maladaptive, or are they doing something positive? So question that. You talked a lot about our reality. Our reality is framed by our experiences, the culture that we grew up in, our parents, the people that we've hung out with, the media, everything that we expose ourselves to. All of that is subjective. It is a subjective construct that is unique to us. Someone who grew up in a different part of the world has a different belief system, and it's probably underpinning most religious and political ideological conflicts, global conflict, etc. I'm not even going to get into that shit, but if we at least recognize that, then we can start to have an empathy for two things. One is other people are just like you. They are, accumulation of their belief systems, and we're probably not so different. And that your experience of reality is subjective to everything you've been exposed to, and is not an objective truth. Okay. Anyway, take that wherever you want to take it. I think we'll leave it off here. With identity can change. Identify if your words, your beliefs, your thoughts are keeping you very rooted in a fixed place and preventing you from doing something that will lead to positive change. Catching language that is fixed, and then looking for ways to at least soften the rigidity of those belief systems and the words that you use, which may open you up to being willing to make changes. And that's going to be very unique and different for each person, but I think it's actually at least a valid starting point. And you alluded to this, identity will shift along the way. Be open to the fact that your life experience, belief can change in time. Remember, end of history illusion. And just be open-minded, be curious about the process, be willing to put yourself into uncomfortable scenarios, because I like this concept. I'll say it quickly. The surface area of luck. So people talk about people being lucky. Oh, look at that person, they're lucky, blah, 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 whatever. And okay, sure, maybe that person has advantages you don't. But everything I said at the very beginning of this about all these career opportunities, they were the products of me putting myself in the room, literally, whether it's getting on flights, metaphorically, creating points of contact, supporting other people, and doing so a lot over a very wide span of time without a specific expectation in return for any particular action. No emotional reaction to an outcome. And I see your face. It looks like you want to go on a big, big tangent, but I don't have time. I apologize, Ruby. But if you could let go of the expectation of specific results over certain outcomes, which includes, hey, I didn't lose weight, even though I had a hard workout in the gym, did cardio and what have you, string it together over a long time frame. I promise you, trust in the process, leap of faith. It will add up and it'll be worth it. I'll leave it off there.
I actually think, with not identity being the biggest theme of all of this, the biggest theme is detach from the outcome and do things back to focus on what makes you feel good and the person you want to become. So yeah, that is identity, but it's all based off feeling good. What is it that you can do to detach from the outcome? Because the more that you try to rush the process, the longer it takes. And I guess that kind of comes to the end of world thing as well. But that's literally it. The more you try to rush it, the longer it takes. and then we have to start over again, and then we feel like we have even less time, so then we try to rush it more. But what is that in the end creating? I really loved that. It's the accumulation of your belief systems, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
So
been fun. I
Andrew,
appreciate you having me on.
yeah, Andrew needs to go, and I'm gonna tie this up now. I loved this conversation. I know I didn't really ask any questions. It was just like bouncing off each other because there was so much greatness in what you said, and I hope a lot of you listening to this can relate to this. Stop putting so much pressure on the expectation of an outcome, and you'll realize over time that all the things that you're doing have stacked in your favor because you put yourself out to the opportunity for luck to happen to you. It didn't just luck its way. So yeah, thank you all for listening. And where can they find you? Andrew Kurtz Fitness on Instagram, and where else would you like to lead them?
Instagram's a great hub. If you message me, I'll respond to everything. I have been working very hard on a new format with my podcast again after 300 and nearly 20 episodes interviewing coaches. Ruby, I know you're a longtime listener. That's more career development stuff. Then I just realized I need to serve a bigger, broader audience. Cast a little wider net. I know coaches are still loving the new format, but I want to help more the end users. So the new episodes are great. Today, as we're recording, I just had Jonathan Goodman, who's an industry leader on. We're recording on the day he released his new book, The Obvious Choice. Great book. Excuse me. And he's just one of a number of guests I've had. So check out Lift Free and Diet Hard on your podcast platform. Come hang out with me there. And, for everybody listening, let's leave you guys with this. If you regularly tune into Ruby and you love what Ruby does, and, Ruby's unique and irreverent personality and thought process, which you get to see every time you listen, right? I've had Ruby on my social media for a long time. Second time on the podcast. I'm used to it. So she puts a lot of time, passion, energy into this stuff. You can repay that kindness, reward her by turning around and giving her a good review. So if you have never done it, give Ruby a kind review, share it with someone you think would enjoy it, and message me on Instagram. I'm more than happy to respond if you got questions. Thanks. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, guys. Bye.